Hey, I want to tell you a Christmas story. Do you want to hear a Christmas story? I know some of you sticklers out there are like, it's Advent. But this is not going to be a Christmas story like you've probably heard before. It's not going to sound like a Christmas story. And I want to start with a Christmas carol. It's also not going to sound like a Christmas carol at all. But it's in the 137th Psalm. And I'm gonna do it in King James. So that kind of sounds Christmas carol-y, I think. So I'm not gonna make you sing it, but let's read it together. Psalm 137. Let's read. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hung our harps upon the willows, for there our captors demanded a song, and our desecrators required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? I think that could catch on. Don't you know? Somebody should tell Mariah Carey. This could be the new All I Want for Christmas. Okay, I know this doesn't sound like a Christmas carol yet, but will you hang with me for a minute here? Because this is the song that the exiles sang when Israel was conquered in war and ripped from their homes by the Babylonian Empire. And that leads us to a sort of Christmas story. Like I said, it's not going to sound like a Christmas story at all. It's the story of the prophet Ezekiel. And here's how the whole book of Ezekiel starts. Let's read it together. In my 13th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day, while I was among the exiles, by the Kebar River, the heavens were open, and I saw visions of God. So, what do we already know? Let's keep that one up. What do we already know about Ezekiel, just from this? What's that? Oh, yeah, so he's young. Yeah, he's young. He's in his 30th year, 4th month. And he's keeping time, too, right? He's kind of keeping time like a man in prison. My 30th year, my 4th month, my 5th day. What else do we know about him? He's in exile. He's in exile. And he's with others in exile. And where else is he? Where is he in exile?
It's by the Kebar
Kebar
River.
River. You know where that is. Oh, it's in Babylon, actually. It's in Babylon. So this Psalm 137 might be a song that he's reluctantly singing in exile. And last thing, I saw a vision of God. I saw a vision of God. Okay, let's read on. The word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest. Okay, so we discover something else about Ezekiel. He's not just a prophet, but he's a priest. So where does Ezekiel work then if he's a priest? In the temple. Right. But where's the temple? It's in Jerusalem. So, if you remember, in the religious mindset of that time, every nation had their own gods. And so if your nation got conquered, that meant that your gods were conquered too. And not only that, but it was thought that the God of the Israelites, Yahweh, lived in the temple in Jerusalem. So, if you were to go away from the temple in Jerusalem, that meant you were to go away from your God too. So imagine, life is pretty devastated for Ezekiel. Not only was he away from his home, which was destroyed, not only was he away from the temple, which was destroyed, but there was also this overwhelming feeling that God, whom he loved and served, was miles away, if that God was alive at all. So he sits by the river Kebar in Babylon, and he cries, and he cries, and he cries. And he has no expectation, that God will show up this far from home. So guess what happens next? Guess. Now you can't guess because it's too weird. You can't imagine what happens next. Okay, this is going to go fast, so just hold on, okay? First, there's a storm cloud with lightning, and it's all glowing like molten lava, but inside there's these 4 creatures, and it kind of looks like humans, but they also have wings, right? And they each have 4 faces. Well, okay, so one face is like a human face, and then there's also like this lion face and a cow face, and then, oh yeah, there's an eagle face. Are you still following me? Because this is not the weird part yet. Because they're like super fast, like pew, pew, pew. These cats were fast as lightning, and they're riding on these wheels, and there's wheels even inside these wheels. And oh yeah, these wheels have eyes on them. And this is my favorite part. Ezekiel says their rims were high and awesome. Maybe not exactly like that, but who knows? Who knows? And it says, wherever the Spirit went, the wheels went, pew, pew, pew. And then on top of this whole contraption was a throne, right? And it's wrapped in a glowing rainbow. And from it, God's like, hey, I'm here. And when Ezekiel saw it, he peed a little bit. It doesn't say that in the Bible, but I'm pretty sure, I can be pretty certain about this. So what in the world is going on here in this story? I mean, it sounds like by the river Kabar, Ezekiel found some mushrooms, right? This is a bizarre story. What is going on? I think that sometimes when we're so gripped by grief and loss, and the bad news keeps coming in the 30th year, 4 months, 5 days, that sometimes it takes something really weird, something really bizarre to break through to us. And after the shock wore off a little bit, what Ezekiel, the priest, would have realized in this wild and weird vision is that God is mobile. God is not confined to the temple like Ezekiel imagined. God is not confined to Jerusalem like Ezekiel imagined. God's got wheels, right? And God comes to us, even in exile in Kabar, even far from home. So I know this doesn't sound like a Christmas story to you, does it? But it is. It is the story of God coming to us when we can't get to God. It's about God becoming home to us when we feel torn from our sense of home. And friends, that is the Christmas story. That is the story of God coming in a way that we never could imagine. And that is the good news of incarnation. Are you with me? This feeling of being without home, this is a universal feeling. The people of God, we have always been a people of the tent, sojourners on the way, both pushed and pulled by this ache for home. And this ache that we feel for belonging, it's for a place where we're known and nurtured. It's a place where everything just seems to fit. It's just in the right place. It's a place from which we can launch. It's a place to which we can land. And we ache for these tastes of home. And that ache is what we call Advent, the season that we're in right now. And we feel unhomed whenever we're pulled out of our places of comfort and security. And we know this in so many ways, right? You know, we know this when we lose our job. We know this when we lose a loved one. When we lose an important function of our body. And yes, we know this when it's unclear where we might even sleep tonight, right? You know, it's amazing to me that we can talk about the Christmas story at all without talking about homelessness. Isn't that weird? We can just skip over that part. The Gospel of Luke says that Joseph and pregnant Mary were forced to leave their homes because the empire wanted to count up everyone they conquered to see how much tax they could squeeze out of them. The Gospel of Matthew says that the puppet King Herod wanted the toddler Messiah dead. So Joseph, Mary, and Jesus fled without documents and became refugees in Egypt. It's impossible to talk about the story of Christmas without talking about homelessness. And I want to suggest that those of us in permanent housing, man, we've got a tougher time accessing this story of Christmas. Because it's so often packaged in consumerism and enshrined in super sentimentality so that it just never actually reaches the earth, never hits the ground. About 10 years ago, I was in this writing group, and I was working on a retelling of the Christmas story that was set in the present day. And in this retelling that I was working on, Maria and Jose were immigrants, and the shepherds were orange pickers in Southern California, and ICE agents were out to get baby Jesus. And I don't know, I thought it was a compelling idea, but I gave up on the script. I never finished it. You know why? Because I just thought it was too fantastical. I just thought, man, who would ever believe that this would happen? And some of you sent me news articles this last week that reported two recent incidents. One at the family shelter at the Redmond United Methodist Church, and one right here at the New Bethlehem Day Center, in which it reported that a woman entered the sanctuary of that facility posing as someone in need of resources and shelter, but then suspiciously started asking strange questions of the clients and staff, and later was seen outside the shelter talking to agents in a U.S. Customs and Border Protection vehicle. Came as a shock to me. Wasn't a shock to those of us experiencing homelessness, though. It also came as a shock to me that in order to get into a new apartment, you need to have about $3,000 extra lying around. Or you have to work 90 hours a month in a minimum wage job in order to afford a two-bedroom apartment around here. Or that the living wage for a family of four on the east side is now up to $95,000 a year. That's practically 6 figures. Or that 70% of Americans are just one paycheck away from homelessness. It's no wonder that homelessness has increased by 21% in the last 3 years on the east side. But that's the setting. That's the setting for the Christmas story. That's the world that Emmanuel comes to, although it might not sound like a Christmas story that you've heard before. It's impossible to talk about the Christmas story without talking about homelessness. Friends, Advent is it's almost half over. Can you believe that? With what's left of Advent, will you allow yourself to ache for home? And not just mask that ache with a few more drinks or shopping sprees or the distraction of numbness of your choice. Rather, will you allow yourself to ache for home and find community and belonging with others in their ache, however that homelessness looks? Because the story of the incarnation of God, leaving the power and privilege of being God, says loud and clear to all who hear that the experience of feeling displaced does not mean being displaced from God. This is what Ezekiel discovers in that wild, wild vision that breaks into his grief. Why? Because God's mobile. And God is making a home in us and with us. Why? Because the Christmas story isn't only a one-time thing. It continues with us. It grows in us. And we discover God with us right now as we discover God in exile. and as God invites us to become home with others. And I think, Salt House, I think that is glad tidings of great joy for all people. Amen to that?